Hey folks, this is part 2 of 2 with Dr. Nick answering your listener questions. Some of them relate to COVID and some of them relate to customer service in COVID, and even more of them relate to his episode and some follow-up questions that you listeners had. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and listen. Some of your questions will get answered there, and the rest of them are going to be answered now. Oh, hi, you're listening to Service from Hell, a podcast featuring people that are currently in customer service positions or the lucky few that got out and all of the good, bad, and infinitely irritating things that go along with that work. I'm actor and writer Kate Gaffney, and I'm uniquely qualified to discuss this as I used to work at a very busy and very popular comedy club in Los Angeles. And at least one of you listening right now has probably grabbed me and told me you were ready to order when I was running around like a crazy person. So let's eat. So on that note, Harold in the UK sent us an email, and this is such a quintessential UK email. One of his questions was, why did Trump survive? Not how, just why. And I died. So for Harold, why do you think Trump survived?
Because he's the most amazing. He has the most amazing immune system that ever was hit by COVID.
Answer this for real, Dr. Nick. Answer this.
I honestly, you can say how a whole group's going to do, but you can't say how any individual is going to do.
Well, I thought it was correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought some of it was proof of an economic disparity because I read a doctor's response who was at the VA when he was there who stated he got the best of everything immediately. Your insurance companies won't approve the things he had access to until you are ready to die. And then we can start the same treatments on you that he got from Jump Street. And do you think that that's real?
There's probably some of that. In our city where I practice, people are pretty loose with the Decadron and the Remdesivir.
Sure.
And, the convalescent plasma, which we've kind of learned doesn't do much. And there's some other anti-monoclonal antibodies that are given that have not yet been really proven useful. He got the Decadron, he got the Remdesivir, he got some experimental antibody, which I don't think is doing much. He probably got it. He probably was able to jump the line with that. When you have a community, you have to be careful about your resources. And so he may have, I don't know how busy they were at the time, how many doses of those medicines they had to give. They might have had to ration them more. Another thing I've had a front row seat to in this job is institutional racism, which is a real thing. There is a disproportionate number of Black people who've been sick from this.
Come on, Nick, say it again. Yep.
But, it's not because the virus is racist or any of the people caring for people at the hospitals are racist. It's because the institutions
run by humans
are racist.
So humans running them are.
The pre-existing conditions that make you more susceptible to this virus, diabetes, obesity, asthma. These are things you get when you're not so well cared for. You don't take as good care of yourself. I remember when we were setting up our practice, we were trying to decide where we're going to spend our energy in the city. And we kind of had a vague idea where we already work, but we were going to kind of tone it down to a tight catchment area. And this is the only time in my entire career I felt like Dr. Evil and some kind of a movie. We went to this meeting with the company we're working with. And again, the purpose of this was to figure out where the need was.
This is unrelated to COVID. This is you setting up your practice of medicine.
This was years ago.
Okay.
But it speaks to the issue. We go to this restaurant and they rented out, it was a slow night, but they rented out the entire back room of this restaurant so we could have it to ourselves. Had a white tablecloth pinned to a wall and had a projector. And we looked at the city of St. Louis, divided up by zip code, with a heat map applied to it by the severity of chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease is something you get when you have pre-existing conditions like diabetes, hypertension, tobacco, obesity. When you're not well, these are things we know how to treat. We know how to treat hypertension. We know how to treat diabetes. Obesity is a little more difficult. It comes with poor food choices, which might be learned or might be what you have available to you. These pre-existing conditions are what drives kidney disease. People who do not take very good care of themselves and have these conditions get these conditions. So it is a disease of the disenfranchised. And in our city, the zip codes that had all of the darkness to them were the Black communities, North City and North County. And it was almost, the West County, it was nearly white. It went from cream to white. And in North City and North County, it's like Delmar is our street that divides Black from white in St. Louis. A whole different conversation is institutional wealth and housing and redlining and all that and protected covenants. And I'm not going to get into that today, but for those reasons, there's a street in every city, at least in the Midwest, that divides Black from white. And this is the street. And everything north of Delmar is progressively hotter for chronic kidney disease. I was looking at a map of where the most disenfranchised people were, who also happened to have all the chronic kidney disease. Well, my areas of the city were the ones that got hit hardest at first. Now, the people who get hit hardest are the ones who have don't have a mask policy. The second go around, the masks do work. They're not perfect, but they do work. And if you mandate mask use inside, people don't get as infected. But the first go around, the people who got hit hardest were the Black people in our communities that I work. And they're the ones with these pre-existing conditions, it's everyone else has observed that law enforcement, although policemen themselves are not racist, law enforcement incentivizes enforcement in areas that are disproportionately Black, and that's what people tend to see. But I've seen it much more closer with this health condition that has come up this year. So I got off on a tangent here a little bit. You were talking about Donald Trump, and so getting back to that question, maybe he was able to jump the line. I'm sure he did. Mm-hmm. But, people who are, and there are plenty of people who are turned away at the ER only to come back really sick. There is that happens. There's a resource problem. And also, if you don't have health insurance, you don't have as many opportunities. And, for the poorest who either don't have insurance or have Medicaid, they're not appealing to any health system. Also, if you had a job that was lost, now you don't have health insurance. So, it becomes another component of poverty, health insurance, which I think is the argument. If there is an argument to be made for why you'd have a government mandated insurance, it wouldn't be about a national debt problem. It would be that it'd be another economic redistributive thing you would do to help the poor, a safety net to help the poor, just like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, that kind of a thing. That'd be the argument. It'd be to decrease the widening gap in wealth in this country,
But fuck the poor, Dr. Nick. Nobody cares. I mean, who cares? Fuck them.
It's all very good for business.
Yep. Well, we're keeping everybody happy on this comedy podcast. Hope everyone's enjoying. Okay. We're going to get to more fun questions because...
Next, we'll do impressions.
Yeah. Wah, wah. Okay. Actually, that question's kind of sad. I'm going to skip that one. We're going to skip that one. Anonymous in North Carolina, I don't know why they wanted to remain anonymous, but they did, said, I'm thinking of road tripping with my friends. Is this a terrible idea?
I think a lot of people ask about travel. My personal opinion is that travel is fine as long as you obey the rules, which is wear a mask when you're indoors or you can't distance from other people. Make sure everyone else is wearing a mask or don't go there, and wash your hands a lot. So if you're going to an airport is following the rules as well as any hospital. Mask wearing, they're cleaning surfaces. Airport's safe. Your problem traveling through an airport is really going to be about the place you go, probably more than sitting next to someone in an airplane.
That's interesting.
I think there's going to be people out there who disagree with that statement, but we work shoulder to shoulder in the hospital all the time. The number of people who have gotten sick at work has declined. It hasn't gone to zero, but it's declined significantly because of use of masks by everybody. And so I think these rules are you just apply these rules and you're fine. So on your traveling trip, as long as you're distancing from other people, or when you're going into a place, you're wearing a mask at a place where everyone else is wearing a mask and you're washing your hands, you should be okay. And you just apply those on a day-to-day basis. So if you walk into a place and no one's wearing a mask, you walk right back out,
What about in the car, though? Because this question specifically was talking about driving from point A to point B. Does everybody need to wear a mask in the car?
Well, if it depends on whether they want to be in the same bubble.
If they're not already in the same bubble. These would be people coming because this person was like, we're going to all come. I just distilled the question down to just this, but they had explained, we're coming from different parts of the country so we can see each other and we're just going to drive. I forget where they said they were going, but just say North Carolina to, I don't know, Florida. Just say that's what it is. Would that be safe if they are not already in the same pod?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways you could quarantine for 2 weeks to prove that you don't have it and then come together. You could just trust the other person and see what happens. If you want to stay separated and not in the same bubble, you could wear a mask and, maybe open the windows a little bit and ventilate that car. They say in a space, whether it be in a room or a car, you want to kind of ventilate it somewhere between 3 and 9 times an hour to make sure that the likelihood of getting something inside is less. So in a car where it's a tighter space, you might want to ventilate it more closer to the 9 times an hour. So you may want to crack a window and turn up the air. But that, so that's what all the cab drivers and the Uber drivers are doing, and so you could do that. The only way to guarantee you're safe is to just hide in a basement,
right?
Unfortunately, that's not a choice a lot of us have. So you have to move through this world with a set of rules. I think the simplest sense-making rules are just wear a mask in place where other people are wearing a mask and wash your hands.
Okay.
And if you can, distance.
Sarah from Minnesota asked a few questions that you've already answered, but she also said, are we ever going to be able to go out without a mask again, ever? I think because like in some Eastern Asian countries, there, masks are sort of standard practice. I'm thinking specifically of China and I'm trying to think of where else I've seen it. In Korea.
Well, in the areas there's countries that didn't get hit nearly as hard, in part had practice at this. So they know they do this stuff already. I don't think I'll be surprised moving forward in life when I see people wandering around at the store with a mask on, years from now, whatever. I guess normal, when people ask, are we going to return to normal? You could say, when are you going to be able to interact with other people without worrying about dying?
Jesus.
That's one question. The other question, I was like, what do you want? What are you looking to get back to, normal? I always kind of laugh a little bit. Like, are you looking to go back to financial instability, institutional racism, lying politicians, media entertainment, what was normal?
Sure.
I guess if do you want to be with, close to other people without getting worried? I think once we have a number of the population inoculated, most studies reference a third or 2/3 of the population, then you're probably safe. So the virus won't leave the planet until everyone's vaccinated, or a large number of people on the planet are vaccinated. But a community is probably safe if, more than 2/3 of the community is vaccinated. So, and the vaccine lasts longer than having been infected, which is why I'm not saying if you've been infected or vaccinated. I don't think having been infected changes much for you other than you get a little reprieve.
Okay. David in New York, who was probably being funny, but I've seen a version of this question a few times, but I'm going to filter it for the listeners and change it just a hair because I want you to be able to answer this and not feel uncomfortable too. Not what he wrote, but what he implied. Is there a safe way to have a sexual encounter at this time if this isn't a regular rotation? So basically, if you have
Can
a
I still do
friend,
Bumble?
if you have a circulation of Tinder friends that are seeing you naked, is there a safe way to do that during this time?
I wish I could tell them yes, but
Okay.
yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. So Pornhub it is.
We don't even have testing, right? I mean,
Right.
there are rapid tests that are so expensive and hard to get. The only people who get them in St. Louis are the Cardinals players. Most of us, when we think we're sick, we have to get the swab in the nose and wait 5 days. That's crazy. You know, what do you do in the 5 days? You just sit I mean, so even if you have a negative test, it's already tardy, you know?
Sure.
You can't apply it to today. It's from a week ago, you know?
Sure. So in theory, you should be getting tested every day and just have a rotation of like, oh, that test negative, negative, negative. Oh, found it. That was from 5 days ago or whatever. In theory.
Yeah, and it's not even a good test. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, if from day 4, maybe a day or two before you're symptomatic, the sensitivity of the test is like 40%. A day after you get symptoms, it's like 60%. It's still shit. Mm-hmm. We don't have any tests we use on a regular basis that's that poor a test. These tests are bad and they're late. So if someone just got tested and they have a positive test, that's a 5-day-old test. So, and it wasn't a good test to begin with. So
there's no sex with strangers, folks. You heard it here first. Stop doing that, at least during COVID. Not yucking anyone's yum, but don't be dumb.
Kate says.
I've made it a fact. This just came to mind. This isn't still on the list of questions, but what do you feel about kids going back to school?
They've been really responsible. So I have a 9, 10, 11-year-old, all girls, and they've gone back to school. And what they've been doing is keeping the bubble size of each kid. Not only are they all wearing masks and washing hands and distancing in the classrooms, but then they keep like one class to itself. So they're effectively a bubble. And those bubbles, if anyone in that bubble gets symptoms or gets sick, then the rest of them stay home too. And they're behaving like we do every day at the hospital, where I'm walking in. Today I walked into 3 COVID patients' rooms, you know. So if they're masking and washing hands, the chances of them getting it anyway, if someone in their class had it, is. So I think they've been very responsible from what I've observed. So I think it makes good sense. Though even if it's spreading really bad in an area, the way the school systems have adapted, I think, from my observation, is great, and they can stay open. You just have to be able to stay home at the drop of a hat, which is a problem for working people.
Hello.
If you're in the house. So.
Yeah. So to try and sort of shift this a bit to customer service, personally, for me, these are questions I came up with. I wanted to know if patients have been nicer, meaner, not different. Like if you've noticed as this has continued to go on, and if so, like how are you taking care of yourself? Because that must be getting increasingly more depleting if they're being shittier to you.
The patients haven't been worse. I think when they're sick with this, they're just kind of out of it. And this time around, the outcomes are better because we're not intubating right up. So it's a little bit more rewarding to take care of them.
Okay.
And so that's good. They still can stay sick for a very long time, and that. I think everyone's been a little bit more appreciative, actually, which is kind of nice.
Oh, that is nice.
Because usually they just expected to not be sick, and they were inconvenienced with their whatever, whether it be a office visit or a pneumonia or whatever. They'd kind of take it out on they'd kick the dog, so to speak, but we were the dog, you know. So yeah, people are a little bit more appreciative.
What about their family members? Are they being shittier to you guys? Or I guess because they can't even be in the room. So I guess you don't even have to.
It's so tough. They can't even be in the hospital most of the time. For better or worse, we're not even seeing them. I'm talking to them, a few of them on the phone, but usually that's when we have to make tough decisions. And, where we might have disorder, someone who's a family member who's kind of disruptive in the hospital or something. We don't have a lot of that this go around because they can't be there. So if they do have a negative attitude, we're not seeing it as much.
That's good. That's actually good.
So, I mean, yeah, it's the other side of the coin, though. The other side of that coin is these people are sick as tar in the hospital alone and scared, and so you're like, which one's better? I don't know. I could be selfish and say, well, now,
sure,
but it's not about me when I show up.
But how are you refueling then? How are you taking care of yourself to be able to handle all this?
Well, I kind of have a long answer to this question. I had a bit of a reason to work on my resiliency a few years ago. When you're, I can't speak for most, but I had the goal of being a doctor, and that was my goal. And so I did everything I did in school was designed to get me to that goal. So English, I need an A. Badminton, I need an A. If it didn't matter what class it was. If it was something I was going to need as I thought like physiology or biology, I took it more seriously. But there was a lot of stuff I just did what I had to get the grades. And then I had a lot of free time. I knew exactly what I needed. And then I knew when I was done with that, I could relax. And so I had a very easy time of college. And, in med school, I was constantly feeling like I was a failure. But outside of that, we had your time off when you've passed your tests or whatever. You knew what your purpose was. Getting through residency, getting through fellowship, you had a goal. And you they train you to kind of become this medicine robot, You're not supposed, you just you learn very quickly that no one cares when you're struggling. You just keep it to yourself, all that stuff, all that negative stuff, right? And then you just kind of coast along. Once I like a lot of people, once I became a doctor, I didn't have a solid North Star anymore. So you're just kind of coasting along. And like a lot of other people who don't have the exact focus on the horizon they're working toward, I had something you might call like a breakdown in 2015 and 2016. It's basically struggling with how medicine was different than the way I thought it should be. When everyone's and also struggling with the usual fear that comes from shame and comparison and disengagement and all that, just not being enough, feeling like you're a complete scarcity honest. Of who you are if you're just not measuring up. And just also when you think that things should be done one way and everyone's doing it a different way, it kind of feels like it's an attack.
Oh yeah.
I'll give you an example. Hyponatremia is a condition where you have too much water in your body. Hang in there with me on that.
Wait, I've literally never heard of this, so I'm actually interested. All your other shit's boring. This is interesting. Go ahead.
So, your body holds on to too much water for several reasons. And the problem with that is the cells of your body swell like rice in the bottom of a bowl of water, which is isn't a problem for most of the cells of your body, except for your brain, which is inside a rigid skull. So you start to develop with this problems with your cognition, and it can get so severe, the swelling can get so severe that your brain can shut down into seizures. And even with mild, I would have loved to do this study. They had a study where they're like, what about mild hyponatremia? What about a mild too much water in the body where your blood is a little too dilute? What about that? So they decided to test people that have normal blood concentration to people that blood is a little dilute by doing the roadside alcohol testing,
Oh, sure.
And just for kicks, because it made no sense at all otherwise, they threw in inebriated. This is all in college students. So they got a third group of college students inebriated to do
that means roadside. Drunk. Keep going.
Yeah, drunk. So they had one control group of college students that had nothing. Another, they gave medicine and water to dilute their blood. And then another, they got tanked. And the three groups, they did the roadside alcohol testing. Now, it's not a surprise that the people who got inebriated just their lines were all over the place. To get from point A to point B on the walk a straight line test, it was quite a bit longer. But the people who had their blood to be a little bit dilute were all over the place.
Really?
So yeah, and you ask them, and they all thought they were fine. So they were the ones who were likely to fall off a chair or down, have a tumble.
But they thought they were okay?
They thought they were fine. Ooh. And they looked fine. And you'd see them in your office. They look fine. And they're doing all the normal things. So anyway, these people come into the hospital and they're terribly hyponatremic. They're way past the point where they should be seizing. Now, the scarier thing about this is if you correct the concentration too fast, the middle of your brain will shrink and you will have permanent neurologic damage that is like locked-in syndrome, which is like where nothing below your eyes work.
Oh my God.
And I've seen that. So it's scary when they call you with someone, hey, Miss So-and-so has a really low sodium concentration, too much water in her body, and you need to fix it. And I'm thinking, holy shit, I better not fuck this up.
Holy God.
So like you get this and then you put in orders. One of the orders is for the nurses to call you every 6 hours with a lab. You'd like to be like John Wayne and be like, hook them up to the hypertonic saline.
He's doing an impression.
Not worry about it.
Jesus Christ.
Worry about it at all. I'd like to be a confident guy, confident in my ability, but you're terrified.
Yeah.
And so you're not like John Wayne so much. You order labs to be drawn and you expect those to get called. And when they don't get called, you freak the fuck out. You're like, ways you could shield yourself. You got numbing and perfectionism and cruelty. You could have like a Tom Cruise,
scream at the set. Yeah. Yep.
That, I tend to get a little bit angry. I got a little bit too much Irish in me.
Same.
And what happens when you do that is they tell you to go to counseling. So back then, and this was happening in little ways and big ways, but there were a few biggies where I'm just like, all right, I got to fucking talk to somebody. I can win at any argument if I choose to take it, but I can usually, if I'm not careful, leave everyone else who I showed I was correct. I can leave them feeling worse.
Scorched earth. Yeah.
And it's not, it doesn't help. It defeats me and defeats everyone else, So I had to work on this distortion of reality where everyone's out to get me and no one gives a shit about me. So,
the listeners do, Nick.
Yeah. Except for all the listeners who are tuning in. So, I had to work on my worldview, my emotional intelligence or mindfulness, and my self-compassion.
Let me reverse you before you finish the story though. So what this was related to, you had an incident where the nurses weren't giving you the labs in time and you had a strong reaction and that sort of set this off.
Well, like that was an example.
I got you. Okay.
Where, and again, you'd love to just be like, just roll that fluid and like, but Duke,
Yeah. And also someone could have permanent. I mean, I'm glad you give that many fucks, to be honest. I would want a doctor who was like living in the ass of the people not doing what I needed them to do, to be frank. I mean.
Yeah, but it's not necessary. And those are the kind of things I'd tell myself when everyone was like, recoiling, I'd be like, well, shit, you need someone here to monitor you people, Sure. And it's not necessary.
So enough of those incidents occur, and then you're like, I need to address my perception of reality because it's affecting how I'm practicing medicine.
Yeah, and it was everything. What are the incentives that doctors march to?
Hello.
Money. Like I had several other kidney doctors in our area who were clearly abusing. They were more concerned about numbers of patients they were seeing than caring for those patients because each patient came with a compensation and they were just racking up numbers, So like you see all this and then I was struggling with, why can't I get these people in my office to show up? Why can't I get them? It just nothing was working. And when I felt vulnerable or shameful, instead of sitting with that, you shield yourself from it. Sure. And it's just a bad way of going. And it's not the same. It's the same. Like my daughters, when they were little, would run around the other side of the house and we'd freak the hell out. Why? We're afraid that they'll run into a car on the street on the other side of the house. Or all of us have to deal with this stuff in our own ways. It's the subject's different, but the problem, the human condition is the same, you know? So counseling is great. I think all of us need a lot of it.
No question. No question.
No one is leaving high school saying, I'm ready for everything the world has to offer.
And I had a great time.
And high school was great. Everything else is great. You know, and the only thing is some people are really good at, you know, hiding it. So I got to a point where I had to either decide to fix this stuff or get the hot car and the young nurse girlfriend and on the side. And, you know,
blow your whole life up.
Yeah. I read that there's the drugs there and all the other stuff. So, you know, with worldview, you just had to kind of realize, you know, Brene Brown was my way in through that understanding.
I love that.
You're imperfect, but you're enough and worthy of love and belonging, that you're capable of change, and that failure and challenges doesn't define you. It's not a test. It's an opportunity for improvement, which goes to grit and resiliency, you know?
Yes.
And it teaches you those understandings help you to become kind to others with whom you work or have a disagreement, you know?
Agreed.
And then self-compassion, you know, my medicine robot thing wasn't working. So you need to, like, you know, actually take care of yourself. So that means you need sleep, and, you know, you need to go sweat somewhere every day, and, you know, that kind of stuff, and set your boundaries. So, you know, I get home at night now, there's no such thing as work the minute I walk through the door. Setting those boundaries are important. And then just your emotional intelligence, it turns out, is also important. They don't teach any of that in
school or
life. It would have been nice instead of whatever. God, what did we, you know, there was like so many classes that just were a waste of time.
Ethics and philosophy, big waste of time. Those two. Yeah, replace it with how to balance a fucking
calculus,
checkbook. Fuck all that.
Who the fuck's using calculus? You know, like
geometry.
And that's in high school and college. What about grade school? You know, I could have used a few less religion classes.
Yeah, and a few more mindfulness.
Yeah. You know, and one of the things that, you know, you guys do that's so important, family is important, but the arts, I mean, they're so important. You know, I on the way to work today, you know, this is my, I don't know, my 16th day in a row or some shit. Oof. I can't remember. And it's, you know, Christmas weekend. And I was laughing my ass off listening to, I've already listened to all of your podcasts, Kate.
Thank you. You're obligated to say that.
Listening to another. I was listening to one of Conan O'Brien's podcast with Amy Sedaris, and she was talking about something she did with her brother, David. Those comedians are hilarious.
Hilarious, you know?
Yes. And she said that if they're in an elevator and it's like a long ride to the bottom of the elevator, you know, 18 floors or something together, she'll just casually, as the door's shut, in front of some stranger, go, you know, David, you really should see your daughter more than you do. And then he'll fire back, well, yeah, but you know, she's been sick, and with all those tubes, it's really, and they're not letting them in the hospital, and they'll have this whole conversation, you know.
Oh my God.
And you need stuff to take your mind, music, you know, the arts. It's just so important for all of us doing this kind of work to have people like you who do the other kind of the work to help us remember what else there is in, you know, it's so important. And, you know, by doing all that, you figure out what your North Star is. And so what can I do and where's the need? And so I feel like I've been focused now for the last 3 or so years, started a new practice, have been slowly working on weeding out my garden and my work environment, advocating for doctors and myself at Jeff City and then with these hospital administrators. And it's not perfect, but I feel like my energy is being used. I'm not sitting in a corner screaming at the wall with a diaper full of shit anymore, right?
I mean, I think that's very lovely and very, very, very vulnerable and very, very honest. And I think it is nice to hear that someone in your position who really is sort of guiding the ship, how you are also taking care of yourself is fundamental. And I think that, I mean, especially just jumping on what you said, especially now getting mental health support is just outrageously important. I mean, it always is, but especially now. So I'm glad to hear that you are taking care of yourself in that way. And that it's not talking you out of being a sarcastic asshole. Like, I like that you've, balanced that. Okay, so I don't want to take all of your time. There's just a handful more questions.
Right.
So where is it? Oh, well, this one's sad. I don't want to ask this, but I am curious.
I'll make it. I'll make it a laugh riot.
Okay, here we go. How many patients have you lost to COVID? Here we go.
Wow.
And if you don't want to answer that, skip it.
I honestly don't know. I'd say, that the days where the sick patient comes in, they're crashing, and we put them on dialysis, and after 2 or 3 weeks, they go to withdrawal. Those are kind of over. So that's an upbeat answer.
Yay.
They're still happening, but, I only really got involved in the hospital when they were going into kidney failure. And there's a lot of kidney doctors in this area for reasons I've already kind of mentioned. So
sure.
It's being I'm not the only guy in the hospital for that. So I have at any one time probably 3 or 5 patients in the hospital sick with this, and they're doing okay.
Okay, good.
They're my patients that came in rather than me getting called to the guy who's dying in the ICU.
Oh, well, that's a nice change. What's the kindest thing someone has, like either a patient or a family member has done for you during this time, if you helped, get them back to, as to use your words, to the street? So if they didn't pass away from COVID, has anyone, followed up with you and been like, done something kind for you?
I get the play. I'm lucky enough to have a role in medicine where I'm in the hospital and in the clinic. So I see people who you're thinking to yourself, this guy is never going to be right again. And then months or years later, you're seeing them and they're living their life totally normally in the office, and that's like the best. The best story I have for that has nothing to do with COVID. She was at the time in her mid-30s. She had type 1 diabetes from childhood and kidney failure, and it had gotten to the point where her diabetes was so brittle and her kidney disease, she just couldn't stick to dialysis and was uremic. She was constantly throwing up. Oh. She was out of it. You'd look at her in her eye. She looked like someone who would look at you when they're just totally stoned,
Bless her.
And just was not there. And she was finding a reason to be in the hospital more often than not. And she's 36, a young kid. So even a really sick 36-year-old isn't that sick. She was sick. And, I'd taken care of her at this point probably for 7 years. And she just hadn't gotten a kidney transplant, was listed in 2 regions. We got her out of the hospital. And before she had a chance to come back in, 3 days later, she was called up to Chicago for a kidney pancreas transplant. I didn't hear from her for about a week or 2. And I'm not thinking about every one of my patients every day. So, I only really, they're on top of mind when they're not doing well or they're sitting in front of me in the office. And then someone called me and like, have you heard from Catherine? I'm like, no, I haven't. I don't know. And we figure out she's getting her kidney transplant, or she got it. Well, a few weeks later, she walks into the office. I was typing on the keyboard, and all of a sudden someone, poof, puts down a stack of papers next to me, and I look over, and it's her. She's in high heels and a black dress.
Aww.
She had probably been wanting to wear for a long time.
Aww.
And she had the posture of someone who was totally fine. And she said, here's some paperwork from the transplant center. Thought you'd like that. And she left. And that was
bless her.
The best, like to see that, so I have a few people who've recovered and they're in the office, and them just doing well is great, And, around Christmas, every once in a while, someone will throw you a card. Those cards, even a little card that just says, "Hey, thanks," no money inside, just a card. It goes a long way.
Yeah, you had mentioned that. I'm glad that's a cool story. Okay. Well, to wrap this up, is there anything that you feel like people need to know or that you wish people knew during this COVID time on, just anything that you're like, oh, I wanted to say this and didn't?
No, I mean, I think it's just the big picture is this is another one of life's challenges, and you just got to take care of yourself and focus on what you can do for the people around you and not worry about everybody else. It's, we'll get through this, and hopefully we won't have another one of these in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being back on. I know that everyone is going to feel reassured having heard you address all of this and just share about your own experience with it. And I think that I'm glad that it puts sort of a face to the healthcare worker. I guess, I don't even know what you call that entity. I know it's a profession, but like just the entity that has been you guys at the front lines and all of us saying, we should really care about you all. We really should listen. We should care. I think the politics sort of derailed that a bit. So it's nice to have for the listeners to have a face to it. And okay, so how can people get in touch with you? They apparently were scared to ask you questions directly unless you got hit up by anyone. But is there a way for, if people have more questions, or do you want to be bothered, or would you rather they?
If you want to, they know your email. Why don't you forward, you can just bottle up all the questions and forward to me. And then one afternoon I can reply.
That would be awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Nicholas J. Mayer, doctor of doctor fame, who is also a doctor. Well, we're going to drop checks now. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us out here at Service from Hell, leave us a review on iTunes and tell your friends to listen, because why haven't you done that already? It will help us reach more people that need to be schooled on the art of being kind, and will be catharsis for those of us still working in the industry. Remember, if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to go out, so don't be garbage and be good to people. It's easier that way. Thanks again, Dr. Nick. This was a bonus episode, y'all. This is not our normal format, but go back and listen to his episode because it's way less depressing than this was. But this is still, we did our best, right?
If you didn't get enough depressing information this time around.
All right, everybody, tell your friends. That's going to be it. Thanks, Dr. Nick. Good night.
You know better what my public wants to hear from.
Oh, I'm going to vomit. I got so many questions too. I was like, wow, people really, they loved your episode. It was very sweet. I got a lot of comments of people being like, it was great. And I think it was, for my mother, she was happy because you didn't really curse and I couldn't get away with as much cursing. So I think she was very happy.
So this is going to be a family episode.
No, damn it. No, I refused.